Welcome to Techie Chap. In today's episode, we will be taking a look at the latest stable branch release from openSUSE. That's openSUSE Leap 15.4. Find out how I got on after the intro. So we're taking a look at openSUSE Leap 15.4, and what you're looking at the moment is the openSUSE installer. And so we're going to go to installation, and it will go off and it will start the installation. I just wanted to show you the installation very briefly, because it's a little bit different to other Linux installs. So what I've done is I've set up another virtual machine on my main laptop here, and we're just going to take a quick look at the installer. We won't go all the way through it because I have a full-on laptop installed with openSUSE Leap 15.4 that we will jump onto and take a look at real-world performance on an actual hardware rather than VirtualBox, because I like to give distributions the benefit of the doubt and to run them as the average home user would run them, which is not necessarily in a VirtualBox but actually on hardware. So whilst this is starting up, I might need to fast forward. Okay, so what you're seeing now is it's going through the preparation, and you can see under the preparation it automatically skips through if you have a network cable plugged in or you're on the wireless. The network auto setup, the installer update, repositories initialization, and then eventually you get to the welcome screen. Now, what's interesting about this, and perhaps why openSUSE Leap doesn't get that much attention in terms of Linux reviews, is that you have to agree to a license before you install it, and basically an agreement with the openSUSE organization that you agreed to use its products within the bounds of its license agreement. So that can put some people off, particularly people who users who are interested in privacy and don't want to necessarily sign up to any license agreement. But in this case, for the sake of this review, we will click next. And what will happen now is it's going off to probe the hardware. I won't enable the online repositories for now, but it does tell you here, enabling the online repositories during installation gives you access to all software that does not fit on the installation media anymore. Additionally, those repositories might contain updated software packages. So if you are installing this, I would recommend you enable this. But for the sake of this review, we'll just skip that. Now, you do get to choose your desktop environment. You get a choice from KDE Plasma, desktop with GNOME, desktop with XFCE. Now, openSUSE with KDE is described as one of the best implementations of the KDE desktop environment around for Linux. So what I'll do is I'll click on desktop with KDE Plasma, and that is also what I have already installed on my Dell laptop here as well. So if I click next, you'll then get to the partitioning part. I've got a 30 gig virtual partition here, and then something called Yast 2, which is kind of like the engine behind openSUSE. Yet this thing called Yast will go off, and it will basically try and discover your time, but it also has a lot of services and other things connected to it. I'll just stick with this for now because it's just a demonstration of the installer. So Techie Chap, that's me. And we'll just pop in a password, click next, Password's too short. Do you really use this password? Yes, I really want to use this password. So this gives you an overview of what it's going to do, and then essentially you click on install, and it will click on install, and it will go off and it will start the installation. Now the install, if you have enabled online repositories, will take some time, and because it's going to go off and download the extra repository information and data from the online sources that couldn't fit on the already quite large full install disk, which is 3.2 gigabytes to download to USB. So it's quite a weighty Linux distribution, this. Anyhow, this is going to install on this virtual machine. So what we'll do is we'll skip over to the actual hardware and we'll see how openSUSE Leap 15.4 runs on a Dell Precision laptop. And here we are. This is the openSUSE Leap 15.4 desktop, which is more or less what you are presented with after install. And boy, has this been hard work to get to this point on this laptop. I'm running a Dell Precision M4500. It's a pretty old laptop, over 12 years old, but it still performs pretty well. It has 8 gig and an SSD in there, so it does pretty well. However, it only has USB 2 ports rather than USB 3, so installation took forever. And but eventually we got there, because obviously it's a 3.4 gig image, and so that's a bit of a problem. But it did get there in the end. Secondly, I came across multiple issues with openSUSE 15.4 just to get the basics working, and let me just cover a few of those off. The first thing is multimedia codecs aren't installed by default on openSUSE Leap 15.4, and there is a very useful site called opensuse-guide.org, and I'll put the links to these things in the description for this video, where you can actually do a one-click installation, or maybe a 2-click, because you have to click OK, thanks to the Yast one-click installer, which is actually really cool. It's a Yast meta package, and it will go off and it will install it for you. So that's the first thing. You have to install the multimedia codecs to be able to play anything, or really to do anything, such as record your webcam, play any kind of MPV, any media files. You kind of have to do that. Secondly, OBS Studio, which is what I use to record these videos, isn't enabled within the default Discover Software Center on openSUSE. So if I just launch Discover, you can see it's the standard KDE Discover app that you get, and there's plenty there, but OBS Studio, for whatever reason, is not available for 15.4. So I thought, okay, I need to then get something like Flatpak or Snap or AppImage installed, so I can then go and install OBS Studio from there. And so this is the installer. First you have to use this program called Zipper in Flatpak, and then you have to add the Flatpak repository, and then you do Flatpak update, and then very interestingly it comes back and says, well, actually Flatpak's already installed. So all you have to actually do is add the Flatpak repository, and then it will go off and install, or it will go off and query the Flatpak repository for the apps that you want. So you can see here, you can list the Flatpak repositories. Oops, let me just type that. Flatpak remotes. Okay, so I have added the FlatHub system repository, to this, which was the only thing really that needed doing. I didn't have to go through the whole zipper thing and everything else because Flatpak was already installed. Interesting. But the repository wasn't enabled, and I checked that by running that same command, the Flatpak remotes, which tells me what remote repositories have been enabled. So yeah, a little bit tricky, but this, again, I'll put this in the description. This does help with being able to install applications that aren't available in the default repositories within openSUSE. Thirdly, but not necessarily lastly, H264 video support is not enabled in openSUSE.org. Sorry, in openSUSE. Sorry, my brain's been a bit scrambled trying to get all this working for this video. So H.264 is not enabled apparently due to patent problems. Now, I've not actually come across a distribution as yet that has been so difficult to set up things like this. Normally there is sometimes one or two small bits, like add a repository here to be able to enable something, or maybe use an app image or something like that. But with openSUSE, they've really made it quite difficult, at least with this version. I don't know about the other versions, to kind of get to the point where the system is usable for even the most basic of things, like playing a video in your browser. However, they have got very decent documentation to work around these things and to enable them. So the solution brief for this was essentially to add the Pacman Essentials repository, specifically if you're using Leap, which I am. This is Leap 15.4. And then I have to install the codecs, and then essentially this article is about enabling it within Firefox. But after you've gone through these steps, your VLC and any other media player that you have installed will then start to work as well, because you will then be enabled for H.264. So to get to this place where I'm able to actually show you the desktop and what it looks like has been somewhat painful, it has to be said. And you know, I've got to knock off marks for that, because yeah, it's not been easy. So you get a nice welcome screen that says "Ahoy, openSUSE," and what's nice about this is it actually takes you to a software repository or software center that's online, which is quite interesting, quite different. I wouldn't say it's even though it's online and can be changed quite easily, I wouldn't say it's the nicest software center. But you can search packages within here, and you can choose other repositories to look at as well. So let's go back to one of my original issues. So if I do a search for OBS Studio, it will go off and search, and it should come back and tell me that no, that's not available in its original repositories. Now I'm on a 100 meg connection, Ethernet connection, and it's not particularly fast, I have to say, on searching, but we'll get to that in a minute. So as you can see, OBS Studio is not available in the openSUSE, which, you know, is fair enough. There are some distributions out there that don't have OBS enabled. So I can think of some other ones like Nitrix, for example. You have to manually you can go to the app image site and you can download the app image file, because Nitrix supports app image, and you can get around that issue by just directly running OBS Studio as an app image file, which is quite an interesting workaround. But anyway, not to harp on about it, but I will put these addresses in the description. If you are new to openSUSE and you're trying this distribution, it is meant to be a really stable distribution based on RPM packages, and I think, you know, it probably it will be, although we've got an interesting thing where I've got multiple welcome screens, but I'm not sure what's going on there. Anyway, so yeah, you have README highlighted in yellow, and it does tell you actually that there are certain proprietary drivers such as NVIDIA and packages such as Google Chrome that openSUSE cannot include by default. Now, I do have an NVIDIA card in this device, this Dell Precision M4500, and I did actually try and install the NVIDIA drivers. However, they didn't work, and I didn't have time to work out why, but the video seems to work with the default drivers that comes with openSUSE. So, you know, you know, that resolves the issue. When I said it didn't work, they just defaulted to 640 by 480 when the laptop started, and in the end I had to use the Yast control center, which is a really good control center, one of the benefits of running openSUSE. And I had to uninstall those NVIDIA drivers, which was completely possible using the Yast control center, and I'll try to get there in this review. It also mentions here that some codecs for playing media cannot be included in openSUSE due to licensing issues. And then it informs you that you can read about those additional package repositories here. And there's a big list there of the repositories that you'll need to add to get things up and running. So on the one hand, it really gets you into the system. You do have to do some work to get this system working. If, for example, you want to watch H.264 videos in your browser, like Firefox, for example, then you're gonna have to go through these things to add the repositories and enable those media codecs, or really to play any type of media codec, you're gonna have to go through adding repositories right at the very start of your openSUSE experience. However, once you do that, you do have a very nice system. Underneath the hood, things run really well. So let's take a look around. We have configure desktop and wallpaper. If I right click on the desktop, and because it's KDE, it is, as you would expect, a standard KDE control panel. And you don't get very many wallpapers by default. You just get the openSUSE default and Honeywave. And so if I just click apply on Honeywave, you see it changes straight away, and openSUSE default, and that's it. That's all you get. So not a lot of options there. If you click on icon, then you've got your standard icon options that you would expect to see within KDE. So let's have a look and see what we are running here. If I click on system settings, you have the icon view by default in system settings, and if we scroll down and click about this system, we can see that we are running KDE Plasma 5.24.4, KDE Frameworks 5.90, Qt version 5.15, kernel version 5.14.21. Graphics platform is X11. Now, kernel version 5.14.21 is a pretty old kernel by today's standards, and we're quite a few versions behind there. And openSUSE Leap 15.4 was only released quite recently, only a few weeks ago. So it's somewhat disappointing to find. It's somewhat disappointing to find that the kernel version is quite so old. So yeah, I mean, it's not old, but I think we're on 5.17 or 5.18, not sure. But yeah, we're a few versions behind here. Now, it could be that openSUSE have chosen this as a design and stability decision and they feel that 5.14 kernel supports the hardware that it needs to, and certainly the hardware that I'm running on this laptop, it has detected perfectly well. I thought I had problems with the hardware, but actually after installing all the codecs and everything else, then everything is working perfectly. So the hardware has indeed been detected properly. So it could be a good call by openSUSE, and particularly if you are running older hardware like I am here, then openSUSE Leap will probably run absolutely fine. I think if you are running newer hardware, you might, and you want to try openSUSE, then you might have to go to the openSUSE Tumbleweed version. And Tumbleweed is a rolling release, and also considered a lot more unstable. So let's go to the openSUSE website. Here we are. This is the openSUSE Linux OS, the maker's choice, it says here. Leap 15.4, update to Leap 15.4, and you can see here that you get the option to install Tumbleweed or Leap. So get the most complete Linux distribution with openSUSE's latest regular release version. So Leap is really updated not very frequently. At most it's perhaps every 6 months. Sometimes it can be a year or so before Leap gets an update. So again, with the kernel version being quite as it is, by the time you get to the next update, it will be really quite outdated, but that may or may not be a problem, particularly if you're running it on a machine that you're not going to change, you're not going to add things to, then it could be not a problem at all. It talks about things like the openSUSE tools which come with it, and they're great. What we're going to focus on in particular is Yast, so we'll just click on yast.opensource.org, and it says it's Linux's predominant tool since 1996. So Yast is actually what you saw in the installation that we filmed earlier, but Yast also allows you to, it says here, tweak everything. It's essentially a collection of software that allow you to change things like services, the screens, the network devices. It does allow you to change a lot of stuff via a GUI. So let's just take a look at Yast. So if we go back to all settings and we click on Yast, and I'm going to put in my, for some reason it never remembers my password despite me clicking that tick box. Anyhow, so here we are. This is the Yast control center, and if you are delving into the repositories, then you will find yourself in software management and software repositories. So if I click on software management, just to show you a little bit about how that looks, you will find these screens pop up where it constantly updates and downloads the latest things before it lets you into that application, and I do find that interrupts the flow a certain bit, but I appreciate that obviously it's downloading the latest things and updating the latest things ready for you to change should you need to. So if we go to view up here and repositories, this is where you can actually see all your repositories, and you can see the things that are installed within those repositories, and you can actually manage those. As you can see, the Pacman repository has been added, and if we scroll down you can see the various bits that are installed via Pacman, but there is obviously an awful lot there as well that you can install using the Yast 2 installer, and you can search those repositories using the search. So you can install using Yast under software management. However, you can also install using Discover, which is the KDE software manager. So there's actually two things here for managing software, and I find that a little bit confusing. I'm sure that once people discover Yast, if they're testing or running openSUSE, then they'll probably just run Yast as their management tool, because it kind of makes sense, because everything is in here. What's interesting to note is there is also sysconfig editor, and that's something that's really, really unusual for Linux distributions. You can essentially edit your sysconf via a GUI, which is really, really handy, and you can dig into your settings here that start up before you actually get into openSUSE. So yeah, and really tweak some stuff here as well. So that is a really big benefit to openSUSE, is the sysconfig editor. You've also got your standard network services, and you've got things like remote administration via VNC is there by default. Obviously, one of the big things about openSUSE, and just to show you where openSUSE is coming from, is SUSE Linux. So openSUSE is really the open branch of something called SUSE Linux. And SUSE Linux is actually built for the enterprise. When I say the enterprise, I don't mean Star Trek. I mean it's built for the corporates. It's built for the big businesses or small businesses, and it's all based around their SUSE Linux enterprise server. In one sense, it's a competitor to Red Hat, and openSUSE is really like their Fedora, their version of Fedora. So it is an interesting comparison, really, to compare something like Fedora to openSUSE. They're both RPM, they're both by default, and actually SUSE Linux Enterprise Server has been around for a longer time than Red Hat has, as far as I understand. I think 1996 was when they came about. However, and this is what kind of causes problems for some people, is that SUSE is a product, and it's something that is sold to large businesses, and large businesses have a stake in SUSE. So there is a concern by some in the open source world about running something like openSUSE because it has these links. You could argue the same for something like Fedora, given its links into Red Hat. So I run Fedora myself, so I don't have a particular issue with it. However, I can understand where people are coming from when they want something that is a free product, as in open source freedom product, and is not tied into big businesses or anything like that in any way. So that's the SUSE business website, and this is where openSUSE is derived from. So if I just minimize that, that's just to explain a little bit of background around openSUSE and why it has these sort of business management aspects built into it. If we click on hardware, it's going to show us, it's shortcuts through these bars here essentially, so it just jumps. Given that it's all on the same window, I'm not quite sure why it does that, but anyhow. You also have access to the logs via a GUI, which is really nice, and the systemd journal as well. So any errors that you get, you can really delve into stuff here. Let's close that. So what do you get with openSUSE? So you get your KDE desktop by default. You also get quite a lot of applications. Cheese isn't one of them. I was trying to get things working, and I installed Cheese just to see if I had to use that instead of OBS. However, I was able to get OBS working. Haruna video player, when I was getting H264 errors, I thought I'd give Haruna a try and was getting the same issues. However, these are the things that you get. You get the all the KDE, well, you get most of the KDE apps, things like KCount. You get K-Mag, the screen magnifier, K-Mail, most of the things that you get with KDE, all those KDE apps that are written and managed by the KDE apps community, they're all here. Even the games, things like K-Patience, K-Reversi, K-Sudoku, etc. You also get LibreOffice as well, and you get Ocular, OBS Studio. Obviously I installed myself using the Flatpak. Screencast was something else I installed whilst trying to get things working. However, you do get Spectacle, Terminal, Super User Mode, Tiger VNC Viewer, VLC, and you get support for Wacom tablets, Xterm, Yast, and Yast software. So just a little bit more about Yast. So Yast is a very, very impressive software manager. It's in some ways more than a collection of applications to manage hardware and software and display, etc. It's in some ways more than that. The depth of these individual applications is really quite something, and this is something that has really matured over the years. openSUSE has been around for a very, very long time. So yeah, these applications are very thorough and very mature. So yeah, it's interesting. But on top of Yast, you also get the standard KDE settings as well. So you get your standard screen manager, and obviously I'm running this on a laptop, so nothing really to see there. The default file manager is, let's have a look. Oh yeah, it's Dolphin. So if I click on About Dolphin, it's Dolphin 21.12.3. So that's great. Dolphin, really one of the best file managers in the Linux world. You have options straight away like split, where you can copy files from one location to another right there. And you've got a ton of options within the configure Dolphin options as well. So yeah, Dolphin's your file manager. Most of the other apps are actually your standard KDE applications, and you get Firefox as your default internet browser. You also get Conversation as your IRC client. So the version of Firefox that we are running, if I just click on here, Help and About Firefox, let's have a look at that. So we're running 91.10. Now this is the extended support release version. So currently Firefox is on 101, but this is obviously, as I say, the extended support release version. So very old version of Firefox, but with extended support for things like security updates and things like that. And obviously, now that I've enabled Flatpak, I do have a lot more options in terms of browsers and things like that that I can install on here. And as I say, I'll put those links in the descriptions below. So what do I think of openSUSE? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Now that I'm here, now that I'm running it, it's actually pretty decent and works really well. Given the age of this laptop that I'm running it on, as I say, it's an M4500. It runs really quite well. If I go and have a look at about this system, right, let's just have a look, show more information. And let's go to System Monitor. Alright, so here we go. Here's the System Monitor, and this is what's currently running. Now, bearing in mind, as usual, I'm running this with OBS running and recording at 1920 by 1080p. And in fairness, the CPU is getting absolutely walloped at the moment. Probably because, I have other things open. I've got Firefox open. I've got various windows open. Let's just close this down so I'm not absolutely killing the machine. But memory usage at the moment is fairly good. This is by no means the lightest distribution to run, and probably for this type of machine, it's a 12-year-old machine, it may be more sensible to run something a little lighter. To be sure, this openSUSE installer is fairly large, 3.2 gig, as well as all, if you enable the online repositories whilst installing, is even larger and does take an awful long time to set up, certainly on a older laptop such as this. However, as I've said, now I'm running it, I feel fairly happy with the installation. It actually runs quite well, and the options that are in here, particularly the Yast software control center, are really good. So overall, my opinion, openSUSE Leap 15.4 running on a 12-year-old laptop, I would say I would give it 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 for openSUSE 15.4 Leap. There are certain things that people will disagree with, particularly things like the license agreement and particularly things like its ties to large corporations because of its SUSE product. However, if you're just a casual user, I'm not sure if this release is for you, given the amount of steps you have to go through to actually get things up and running. But if you're willing to give it a go and you have a little bit of Linux experience, I think it could be a good payoff. So that's been my review of openSUSE Linux. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, then please click on like and subscribe. If you're running openSUSE yourself, or if you have an opinion about openSUSE, then please do write it down in the comments below. I love to see your comments and interaction. So far it's been fantastic. Really enjoyed reading your comments and the exchange and banter between people as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.